The wind howls across a frozen wasteland. Not land, not sea, but ice. It is April 5th, 1242, and Lake Peipus has become a battlefield suspended between life and death. The ice groans beneath iron. Horses snort clouds of steam, and the cold cuts like a blade. On the eastern shore stands Prince Alexander Nevsky, young, relentless, unyielding, defender of Novgorod, slayer of invaders. His army waits in silence. Spearmen dug in, cavalry hidden, breath held in the frozen air. Across the ice, the enemy advances. The Teutonic Knights of the Livonian Order, crusaders in white cloaks marked with black crosses. Heavily armored, fanatically confident. They have crushed armies before with shock and steel, and now they charge again. 4,000 knights and men-at-arms thundering forward in a wedge of iron. But the ground beneath them is a lie. The ice is slick, the footing treacherous. Momentum becomes a curse. Nevsky's trap snaps shut. Russian flanks surge like wolves from the fog. Cavalry slams into exposed sides. Knights struggle to turn. Horses skid. Formations fracture. And beneath the weight of armor and panic, the frozen lake begins to fail. Some fall, some are dragged down. Some vanish beneath cracking ice into black, freezing water. This is the battle on the ice, where crusading zeal meets winter warfare, where elite cavalry loses its power, and where a single battlefield halts Western expansion into the Russian world. Was the ice truly shattering? How much is legend, and how much is lethal reality? And why did this frozen clash echo through centuries of Russian identity? Stay with us, because on this lake, in the grip of winter, history froze and then broke. Part 1. Setup. Teutonic expansion meets Russian resolve. Wind the clock back to the 1240s, a decade when the world feels as if it is tearing itself apart. Western Christendom is on the march. In the Baltic, the Livonian Order, a militant branch of the Teutonic Knights, drives eastward under the banner of holy war. Officially, their mission is conversion. In practice, it is conquest. Pagan lands are subdued. Fortresses rise. Trade routes are seized. The sword baptizes where the cross alone cannot. Behind them stand powerful backers. Denmark, hungry for Baltic dominance. Sweden, expanding east across the Gulf of Finland. And the wider authority of the papacy, blessing expansion into lands it deems ripe for submission. Their eyes turn toward Novgorod, not just a city, but a prize. A mercantile giant linking Europe to the forests, rivers, and riches of the East. Furs, wax, silver, grain. Control Novgorod, and you control the gateway between worlds. Standing in their path is a young prince, barely 21 years old, but already hardened by war. Alexander Yaroslavich of Novgorod. In 1240, he shattered a Swedish invasion on the banks of the Neva River, earning the name that will echo through history: Alexander Nevsky. That victory saves Novgorod's northern flank, but it also paints a target on his back. While Sweden bleeds, the Livonian Order strikes. During the winter of 1241 to 1242, Teutonic forces surge eastward. With the help of local collaborators, they seize Pskov, a key Russian city. German knights occupy its fortresses. Orthodox churches are threatened. The frontier buckles. This is no raid. It is an attempt to permanently break Russian resistance, to absorb these lands into the crusading state. Nevsky responds with speed and fury. In early 1242, he marches west, retakes Pskov, expels the occupiers, and refuses to stop. He knows retreat invites return. The knights must be confronted, decisively. He drives them back toward the borderlands, toward Lake Peipus, a vast, shallow lake marking the boundary between Novgorod and Livonian territory. In summer, it is a highway of trade. In winter, it becomes something far more dangerous. By early April, the lake is still frozen, thick but uneven, solid near the shores, weaker toward the center. Snow hides fractures. Meltwater seeps beneath the surface, a battlefield that rewards caution and punishes arrogance. The armies assemble. Nevsky fields roughly 8,000 men, a corps of infantry spearmen and militia, supported by archers and mobile cavalry held back for maneuver. They are lighter, faster, accustomed to fighting in harsh terrain. Opposing them are around 4,000 crusaders, the elite of the Livonian order, heavily armored Teutonic Knights, reinforced by Danish warriors and Estonian auxiliaries. Their confidence rests on steel, discipline, and the shock of the charge. They have crushed enemies before. They believe they will again. But this time, the ground is frozen, the weather is unforgiving, and their enemy has chosen the field. What awaits them is not a siege, not a skirmish, but a trial by ice. The stage is set. The lake groans beneath its burden, and history edges toward one of its coldest confrontations. Next, the ice itself, how terrain, temperature, and timing turn Lake Peipus into a weapon. Part 2. Debated battle on ice. Mechanics, myth versus reality. Few battles in medieval history are wrapped in as much legend as Lake Peipus. The image is iconic: Teutonic Knights charging, the ice cracking beneath iron and horse, armored crusaders vanishing into black, freezing water. But how much of this is truth, and how much is memory shaped by centuries of retelling? The legend as we know it today owes much to Sergei Eisenstein's 1938 film, Alexander Nevsky. In it, the ice shatters spectacularly, swallowing knights whole. It is powerful, it is unforgettable, and it is not a contemporary account. The earliest written sources tell a more restrained story. The Livonian rhymed chronicle, written from the Crusaders' perspective, describes the defeat, but places many of the fallen on the grass, suggesting fighting near the shoreline rather than far, out on open ice. There is no dramatic description of mass drowning. Russian chronicles, such as the Laurentian Chronicle, written later, emphasize the frozen lake more heavily, describing enemies driven onto the ice and perishing during the rout. Modern historians generally agree that these later accounts likely embellish the role of collapsing ice to heighten the victory's symbolism. So what actually happened? Most scholars now believe the battle unfolded at the edge of Lake Peipus, near a landmark known as Raven's Rock. Nevsky deliberately anchored his forces on firmer ground, frozen shoreline, packed snow, and partially thawing earth, while allowing the Teutonic advance to come across the ice. This distinction matters. Early April in Northern Europe is treacherous. The ice is no longer deep winter ice. It is uneven, softened from below by meltwater, and slick with surface thaw. Light troops can cross it cautiously. Heavy cavalry cannot maneuver on it safely. The Teutonic Knights advance anyway. Their formation, a dense wedge designed for shock, works brilliantly on solid ground. On ice, it becomes a liability. Horses struggle for traction. Knights cannot turn quickly. When momentum is lost, armor becomes a prison rather than protection. When Nevsky's forces counterattack, striking from the flanks and rear, the knights are pushed back toward the lake. It is during this chaotic retreat, not the initial charge, that the ice likely claims lives. Not in cinematic collapse, but in slips, falls, breakthroughs near thinner sections, and men dragged down by weight and panic. Some drown, some freeze. Many are cut down before they ever reach safety. So the truth lies between extremes. The ice did not shatter beneath the entire army, but it betrayed them at the worst possible moment. And that is what makes Lake Peipus deadly. Nevsky did not rely on miracle or myth. He relied on timing, terrain, and the simple reality that winter punishes arrogance. The knights believed armor made them unstoppable. The ice proved otherwise. Next, the clash itself. How Teutonic shock tactics meet Russian flexibility. And why the charge that had broken so many armies finally fails. Part 3. Night charges. Heavy armor meets slippery doom. The Teutonic Knights strike first. As they have so many times before, they form the wedge, a dense triangular spearhead of elite heavy cavalry. The most heavily armored knights arrive at the tip, lances leveled, shields locked, banners snapping in the wind. This formation is designed for one purpose: to smash straight through an enemy's center and break them in moments. They advance across the frozen ground with confidence. At first, it works. The Russian center bends. Spearmen give ground. The wedge punches forward, armor grinding against shields, hooves churning snow and ice. To the knights, it feels familiar. Another enemy buckling under the weight of steel and momentum. But something is wrong. The surface beneath them is treacherous. The ice is uneven, slick with meltwater, unreliable under thousands of pounds of horse and armor. Momentum bleeds away. Horses lose traction. The tight formation that gives the wedge its power now becomes a trap. Knights cannot turn, cannot disengage, cannot maneuver. And that is when Nevsky strikes. From both flanks, Russian forces surge inward like closing jaws. Cavalry and infantry alike crash into the exposed sides of the wedge. Spears hook riders from saddles. Axes swing low, hamstringing horses. Archers and javelins rain in at close range. The knights are surrounded. Armor that once meant survival now means exhaustion. Fallen men struggle to rise. Horses slip and scream. Commands vanish in the chaos. The wedge collapses inward, dissolving into isolated pockets of resistance. The Teutons attempt to withdraw, but retreat leads back toward the ice, and now panic takes hold. Knights turn their mounts, pressing toward the frozen lake. But the surface that carried them forward now betrays them. Some horses fall. Others break through thinner patches near the shoreline. Men in full armor are dragged down, sinking into freezing water, unable to free themselves in time. Not all die to the ice. Many are cut down before they reach it. But for those who fall through, escape is impossible. The rout spreads. What began as a controlled charge becomes a desperate flight. The Livonian line shatters completely. Order collapses. White cloaks scatter across the frozen expanse, pursued relentlessly by Russian forces who know the terrain and know when to stop. By the end, the losses are severe. Sources vary, but estimates suggest 400 to 500 Teutonic Knights killed, along with many more auxiliaries. Russian losses are lighter, perhaps 800, but the outcome is unmistakable. Elite heavy cavalry, once thought unstoppable, has been defeated by mobility, discipline, and environment. This is not just a tactical failure, it is a revelation. Steel alone is not enough. Shock without control is useless, and winter shows no mercy to arrogance. As the survivors flee, the lake behind them groaning and cracking, the truth becomes clear. This battle was never about ice alone. It was about choosing the field and letting nature finish the work. Next, the aftermath. How this frozen defeat reshapes borders, halts crusades, and forges a legend that will define Russian identity for centuries. Part 4. Weather's role, frozen fate, and thawing trap. At Lake Peipus, weather is not background. It is a silent combatant. Early April in the Baltic is a season of deception. Winter has not yet released its grip, but spring is already at work beneath the surface. The lake appears solid, snow-covered, frozen, passable. Yet below, meltwater creeps, and currents erode the ice from underneath. It is strong in some places, treacherous in others. Nevsky understands this. He does not gamble on miracles or legends. He exploits knowledge. Local fishermen, scouts, and warriors know where the ice holds and where it weakens, especially near shorelines, pressure ridges, and areas churned by movement. The Teutonic Knights do not. Encased in heavy armor, riding war horses bred for impact rather than balance, they commit to a battlefield that punishes mass and momentum. The ice supports their advance, just barely, but it cannot forgive chaos. As the fighting turns and the retreat begins, conditions change. The sun climbs. The surface softens. Snow melts into slick water. Cracks widen where the ice has been stressed by thousands of hooves and the crush of battle. The lake does not collapse dramatically, but it fails selectively at the worst possible moments. A horse slips, a man falls. Ice fractures near the edge. Armored knights, already exhausted, are dragged down by weight and panic. Some drown. Others freeze before they can be pulled free. Many are cut down as they struggle, trapped between pursuers and an unforgiving surface. The Russians move differently. They are lighter, more dispersed, accustomed to frozen terrain. They know when to press and when to stop, when the ice will hold and when it will not. They do not chase recklessly into danger. They let fear and fatigue do the work. This is where the legend grows. Later generations will exaggerate the role of the ice, turning selective failures into mass collapse, retreat into catastrophe. But even stripped of myth, the truth remains powerful. Weather shaped the battle. It slowed the charge. It broke momentum. It punished retreat. Winter did not win the battle alone, but it stacked the odds against the invaders at every turn. By the time the fighting ends, the outcome is beyond reversal. The Teutonic Order is shattered. The frozen lake has done its work, and the cold has claimed its share. As the ice begins to thaw in the days that follow, so too does the crusading ambition in the east. What remains is silence, and a victory that will echo far beyond the melting snows. Next, the aftermath. How this frozen defeat halts expansion, redraws borders, and forges a legend that will define Russian memory for centuries. Part 5. Aftermath and Legacy. Teutons, humbled, and Nevsky's halo. The battle ends quickly. Its consequences do not. In the wake of the fighting, the Livonian order is shattered. Contemporary estimates suggest 400 Teutonic Knights killed. A devastating loss for an elite force that could not be easily replaced, and dozens captured, marched away in chains. Among the dead is Bishop Herman of Dorpat, a key architect of the crusade, his death symbolizing the collapse of Western ambitions on this frontier. The surviving crusaders retreat in disorder. They fall back to Riga, abandoning further attempts to push east. The momentum of Catholic expansion into Russian lands, so confident only months before, grinds to a halt. Never again will the Teutonic orders attempt a major invasion of Novgorod's territory. The frontier hardens, borders stabilize, and Orthodox Russia remains intact. For Alexander Nevsky, the victory is transformative. Already celebrated for defeating the Swedes at the Neva, Lake Peipus elevates him from prince to legend. He becomes the defender not just of territory, but of faith and identity. In later generations, he is canonized as a saint of the Russian Orthodox Church, warrior and protector, sword and cross united. His legacy grows far beyond the 13th century. Nevsky becomes a symbol invoked whenever Russia faces invasion from the West. His image is revived in chronicles, icons, and eventually film, most famously in Sergei Eisenstein's 1938 epic, released as Nazi Germany threatens from beyond the western border. Once again, the story of armored invaders broken on Russian ground becomes a rallying cry. History turns into myth. Myth becomes memory. Memory becomes identity. For the Teutonic orders, the defeat reshapes strategy. Unable to expand eastward, they turn north and west instead, focusing on the conquest and Christianization of Prussia and the Baltic coast. Their state will grow powerful, but its grand vision of pushing into the Russian heartland is over. Lake Peipus marks the limit of their reach. And then there is the ice. Whether it cracked dramatically or failed selectively no longer matters. What matters is what it came to represent. The frozen lake becomes a symbol of foreign arrogance undone by terrain, climate, and local resistance, of elite armies humbled by preparation and patience, of a land that does not yield easily to outsiders. The battle on the ice enters the bloodstream of Russian historical consciousness, not as a technical debate, but as a declaration. This land will defend itself. This faith will endure. This frontier will hold. In military terms, the battle proves that heavy cavalry is not invincible, that shock tactics fail without maneuver, and that choosing the battlefield can outweigh numbers and armor. In cultural terms, it becomes something far larger. Lake Peipus is not remembered because of how many fell. It is remembered because of what did not fall. Orthodox Russia survives. Western expansion halts. And a young prince steps into eternity. On a frozen lake, in the grip of early spring, history hardens, then breaks. and a legend is born that will outlast the ice itself. Conclusion: when ice, steel, and memory collided, the ice has gone, the snow has melted, the lake has returned to silence. But the meaning of April 5th, 1242, has never thawed. On the frozen skin of Lake Peipus, two worlds collided, not just armies, but futures. One side marched beneath the banner of crusade and conquest, convinced that steel, faith, and discipline made them unstoppable. The other stood rooted in its land, its winter, and its will to survive. And survival won. Alexander Nevsky did not defeat the Teutonic Knights with miracles or myths. He defeated them with patience, terrain, and understanding of his enemy, of his soldiers, and of the land itself. He chose when to stand, where to fight, and when to let nature tighten the noose. The ice did not shatter in a single thunderous moment, but it did something far more decisive. It stole momentum. It punished arrogance. It turned retreat into ruin. The knights who had ridden confidently into Novgorod's frontier rode back broken, if they rode back at all. Their white cloaks disappeared into the fog of history. Their ambition halted at the edge of a frozen lake. And with them ended something larger. The Western crusading push into the Russian world stopped here. Borders hardened, faith endured. A civilization remained unbroken, not because it was stronger in steel, but because it was stronger in resolve. From this battle rose a legend. Nevsky became more than a prince. He became a symbol of resistance without recklessness, of faith defended without fanaticism, of victory achieved through restraint. His name would be spoken in cathedrals, painted on icons, echoed in songs, and revived whenever Russia faced invasion from the West. Centuries later, when new armies marched east with new banners and new ideologies, the story of Lake Peipus would rise again. A reminder that this land remembers and resists. So whether the ice cracked beneath the weight of iron or simply bore witness to its collapse, the truth remains unchanged. On Lake Peipus, an elite army was humbled. On Lake Peipus, expansion was stopped. On Lake Peipus, history froze and turned. The lake has long since melted. But the lesson remains carved in ice and memory. Empires may march with steel, but land, patience, and identity decide who endures. This was the battle on the ice, where winter chose a side and a legend was born that would never melt away.